Some dare call it conspiracy.
And welcome to hashtag conspiracy, our show on the side where we talk about whatever we like. I am Brent Lee.
And I'm Neil Sanders.
And I'm Graham Botley.
Hey, Graham. Welcome to the show finally. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Nice cold evening, but all good.
Hey. All right. For our listeners who haven't heard of you, please quickly introduce yourself.
So, my name's Graham Botley. I'm a research scientist by training. I'm a research immunologist. I look at how the body fights diseases, how the body fights viruses. And I also teach research scientists, and I also have achieved a little bit of fame for running a sheep farm.
Fantastic.
You're very notorious on the Twitter.
Yes, a certain cult following, I think.
What, the good cult or the bad cult?
The good cult, I think, definitely.
Just to clear it up, because this is the thing that everybody always asks me, Graham. Are you part of British government intelligence to muddy the waters by spreading disinformation about COVID?
No, about the closest I get to the army is that I don't live too far from Catterick Garrison. So when I go up to Richmond, I see quite a few soldiers, and that's about as close as I get.
You're not going to tell me that's a coincidence. That's it's a bit of a red flag, Graham. Soldiers. Steady.
On a really clear day, I can hear the exercises up on the moors, and that's about as close as I get.
Fair enough.
Right, let's get straight into this. Neil, why are we here today?
Well, because the conspiracy theories have been proven right. Absolutely. It proves it, Brent. It absolutely proves it. Like, everything's been proven right.
Proof?
Apparently. Because of the lockdown files. Now, what's happened is essentially Isabel Oakeshott, for the public good, obviously, because she's not duplicitous or grasping or any of the things that people might say about her. She was writing a book with Matt Hancock after doing an incredibly softball interview with Matt Hancock on James Melville's short-lived podcast. Anyway, she wrote this book called The Pandemic Diaries, which was supposed to basically sell Matt Hancock as a hero and rehabilitate him with the public. And he's trying to go for a sort of celebrity career, isn't he? He was eating anuses in the jungle. Just to clarify, it was a part of a game show. It wasn't it wasn't more Tory sleaze
Ritual.
Yeah, or a ritual. Yeah. No. And anyway, so she's wrote this book about Matt Hancock, and it didn't do terribly well. She got paid for it, obviously, because you do get paid for these things. And then, a while after this, she's basically released these WhatsApp messages, and apparently is it 10,000 or is there 100,000? I forget, but there's a lot. And she feels that it's in the public interest to release this because she says it reveals certain things about the way that the government handled COVID, and potentially what she says is it shows that they were misguided in their handling. And I, for one, think that it does show that, but not in the way that she's actually expressing. Now, there are some that would say that if this was in the public interest, why did you hang on to it for so long? And there's others that might say that, it completely undermines your argument that this is in the public interest because you're drip feeding it in a way to draw people towards your newspaper. But let's not get bogged down with facts just yet. What's happened is that Isabel Oakeshott has decided that she needs to, for the good of the country, throw Matt Hancock under a bus. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of people that would like to throw Matt Hancock under a bus, and not just metaphorically. But I think rightly, some people have been slightly suspicious about Isabel Oakeshott's motives regarding this, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. But the long and short of it is that basically these various conversations showing the behind the scenes activities of the Prime Minister, the Health Secretary, the Secretary of Education, Dominic Cummings, various SPADs or special advisors to the government, chatting away behind the scenes, talking about the way they handle COVID. And for some reason, the conspiracy crowd have jumped on this like it's a revelation, like they've found the lost bits of the Zapruder footage that shows the CIA agent emerging from the grate in the middle of the road. Who said what? Basically, Leilani Dowding and Reich said Fred have basically said, well, that's it. It proves we were right about everything. It shows that everything was fake over the last 2 years, and we've been proven completely right in what they've said. And what it is that they've been proven right about is difficult to say because they've said so much shit over the last couple of years that it's pretty difficult to pick through. Mark Devlin has said that it proves that lockdowns were not needed. And David Icke and Gareth Icke have both said that basically to ignore this, it's a massive distraction. It's just feeding into the narrative that COVID is a real thing, because we must all remember David Icke and Iconic think that COVID is not real. They suspect that viruses themselves aren't real, or at least they wrote that in David's most recent book. And they offered up the suggestion that it was potentially the telephone network of 5G that was initially causing the pandemic. So they've taken a slightly different angle to it. Graham, you're an expert on this. Does COVID exist?
Of course it exists. Indeed, today I had a rather long Twitter discussion with several people who told me that it doesn't exist and I hadn't isolated it and it wasn't there. And this is sort of part of the whole thing, because I think people are scared of science. People are scared of trying to understand things. And so in a way, it almost harks back to, in my mind, sort of prehistoric times. You know, people saw the seasons changing. They didn't know what was happening, so they attributed it to the gods or to devils. They saw disease and attributed it, to curses and evil magic, because they didn't know what was happening. And in some ways, I think some people are still hearkening back to that. And I think these messages, in a way, are almost seen as religious books, religious texts.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, thou shalt not doubt David Icke.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that, if you look at pretty much all religious texts, none of them really come out and say anything with any certainty. They're all open to interpretation, and all religion is, and indeed, that's the argument. That's what priests are there for, to interpret the readings. And in the same way, these leading conspiracy theorists are using things like this. They say this proves lockdowns weren't needed. But of course, what I've seen that happen a lot. And yet when you push them on which bit says that lockdowns weren't needed, well, all of it, or this passage here, and you say, but that doesn't really say anything about lockdowns and necessity or effectiveness. Oh, well, what about this bit? And that's the thing. In the totality of the messages is evidence, but individually there is none.
Well, this is it. It's very much people seem to be applying their own preconceived ideas over it. That was what was strange about it, looking at it on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. People were basically, whatever it is that they've been saying for the last 2 years, apparently this proved it. And it's... it doesn't make any sense really, because they're just applying whatever it is that they've got before over the top of it, and two things. One, just to let people know, we've actually got all the WhatsApp messages and we're going to read them out so that basically nobody thinks that we're lying. We're going to go through them and we're going to say what people think that they've said and actually show what it says in context with what was going on with the timeline and the lockdowns and stuff like that. And second, you've really made me think there, Graham, bearing in mind that David is the Son of God, are his books actually considered a religious text?
Probably to some extent, in that a lot of religion is about what to believe and what to do with that belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not anti-religion in any way, but a lot of religion is about what to believe. And in that respect, yes. Because what he's doing is he's releasing these books and says, this is what you will believe.
Mm.
And what he's then trying to do is get others who read that to spread the word and say, look, this book explains everything. And, some religions explain what happens when you die. Some religions explain what happens if you're evil, etc. And this religion is purporting to explain what is happening in the world around us.
Yeah.
And it's only because there is no and if you look at a lot of the people who follow this, and I know someone quite well actually who believes a lot of these things, they don't understand any of the details.
Yeah.
And because they don't understand the details, they try and fill in the detail with these ideas and these hypotheses and so on that sound plausible and make them feel better.
Well, going back to what you originally said, Graham, I think you're absolutely spot on because I don't know whether I'm sure you're aware of the viruses don't exist. Like it came from people like Thomas Cowan and Andrew Kaufman, idiots as they would be described. Now, why so many people took that on board? I literally watched people take that on board that previously I thought were relatively sensible. And it's because they had a mental breakdown. Like I won't name names, but no, I won't name names. But anyway, one person was told to go round a post office the wrong way, had a complete mental breakdown and ended up crying in his car on fucking Facebook for an hour and a half. And then decided that viruses don't exist. And I'll tell you why he decided that viruses don't exist, because he was terrified. He didn't know what was going to happen. There's an open loop there. You don't know whether you're going to catch it. You don't know whether you're going to be forced to take a medicine. You don't know whether your friends and family are going to die. Yeah. And so you do the mental gymnastics and go, well, I've heard of this bloke on the internet that viruses don't exist. Well, brilliant. That's one less thing for me to worry about.
Yeah, and you fit that explanation. So, one thing you often say, oh, it's not viruses, it's exosomes. Well, without going into different exosomes are little blobs released from cells, and they have a whole range of different purposes in the body. Now, the thing is, exosomes are completely and utterly different to viruses. Now, I know that because I'm writing an exosome paper at the moment. But because people don't know what an exosome is, but they've heard someone say, it's this. And a really good example was the discussion I had today. So I was told that viruses don't exist, and this research study done in the 1950s did this wrong. The thing is, now, since 1950, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of research papers looking at viruses. So I came back with the question, well, in that case, how can we epitope map the virus? And not one of the 4 or 5 people engaging with me today responded to that. Not one.
Because they don't know what it means.
Because they don't know what epitope mapping is. Now, I do, and I know it proves viruses exist. And I think that's the thing. Because of the work I have done, I have seen evidence with my own eyes that viruses exist. And so I look out the window, well, not now because it's dark, but if I look out the window now, I see sheep in the field next door. I know sheep exist.
Yeah.
But if you lived in the middle of London, would you necessarily know sheep exist? We've seen them on TV, but that could be computer generated.
Yeah.
That could be computer generated. You haven't actually got any proof that they exist. And I think you get the same thing with climate denialism. People say, "Oh, but this year's been warmer. This year's been a bit cooler than normal. Global warming can't happen." And you say, "But it's all to do with disruption of weather patterns." It's but I look out the window, and so people, unfortunately, rely on their own personal experience and what they see with their own eyes. If you can't see a virus, it can't exist. And there's a certain irony in the fact that in the modern world, we use smartphones. No one knows how they work, but people still believe that they work.
But the thing is about climate change and COVID, the thing about denying both of those things is that the conspiracy theory has been set up so that if you believe either of those two things, you're being scammed. You're a victim. And so the conspiracy theories has been set up that denial of those is being savvy, because these whole systems, be it the idea of COVID or the idea of climate change, are ultimately to do things like taxes for breathing out, and it's going to ultimately use to put a microchip into everybody and blah, blah, blah. So like, this is the thing. It's about framing and about getting in front of the narrative right at the beginning, basically.
Yeah, and I think that also, feeds back to a lot of religions, because a lot of religions, when they started, were in opposition to officialdom. I mean, you start Christianity, and it was suppressed by the Romans, and and so you had the secret symbol of the fish and stuff to identify yourself to other members, and the Romans were attempting to put you down, and following that religion was then a way almost to circumvent this control. And things like the 5G nanobots, and you get the things that the government is monitoring every single one of our emails and online communications and phone calls.
They must be bored shitless.
Well, exactly. I mean, most of my phone calls are either organising science training courses or phoning the dead stock man to come and take a dead sheep away. It's not interesting. But the government would need to employ 4 or 5 people to monitor my communications round the clock. They're going to have to do the same for you. So they would need to employ 5 times the population of the UK to monitor the UK. But who monitors them?
Well, quite.
Yeah. When you look at it rationally, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, that doesn't mean that there's not a degree of there is examples where people have been monitored or spied on and stuff like that. But again, people take these things to wicked degrees, don't they?
Well, you see, that's why these theories are often build up such strength, because there is a modicum of truth in there.
But often the truth isn't that sexy. It's quite mundane, or it's just not. It's not James Bond, is it? So
no, exactly. And I mean, Bill Gates is often demonized with all of this, and they say, he wants to depopulate the world. Now, of course, there is that video of him saying our population is too high.
Yep.
For global security, it could probably do with being lower. Yes. And that's that nugget of truth that layers then of misinformation are built on. And, the thing that again cropped up today, people say, the inventor of PCR said it shouldn't be used to detect diseases.
Yeah.
Well, I had that one today.
Well, I mean, the thing is, he didn't actually say that.
No, he didn't. He was talking about,
and of course, that also sort of skims over the fact that towards the end, he thought he kept seeing glowing space raccoons.
Well, he was an AIDS denialist as well. This was the point. Someone asked him, how come in HIV patients you always find in AIDS patients you always uniformly find HIV virus? Yeah. And he didn't think that the HIV virus caused AIDS. Do you know what he thought caused AIDS? Being gay.
Yeah.
He said that it was a product of the gay lifestyle, which is, it's not that cool, guy. Like, that's a shitty way to act. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
But again, you see, you then get the layering, don't you, of the theory. So he was sort of following that theory that AIDS was caused by being gay, and that led him to say that. It wasn't the virus. even though we know full well it is. But then other people use that nugget of information to build another theory around,
Yeah.
to say that you can't use it as a diagnostic assay. And you point out to people, well, he never worked on the form of the assay we use.
Yes.
Not once did he ever
exactly.
work on it. So he can't have been talking about it. But again, the lack of in-depth knowledge then comes to the fore, because people say, oh, it's all the same thing. Well, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just for layman's terms with that assay thing, my understanding is essentially Carey Mullis is brilliant in his field, did a lot for the thing, but it's essentially like the Wright brothers telling people that an F-40 jet wouldn't work.
Yes.
And it's like, well, you don't know, do you? And I just want to clarify something else. When I mentioned, because I know everyone's going to go, David, I didn't say he was the Son of God, referring to the Wogan thing. I'm referring to the program he did the following night, the Late Late Show, where he clarified that he definitely was the Son of God, and everyone was the Son of the Godhead. But some people, like him and Jesus, were particularly special. So, just to clear that one up.
Yeah, but of course, that then comes back to wanting to sell books, and and all of these doomsday cults with the people that say, the world is going to end next Friday. I'm your savior. If you give me lots of money, you'll be saved.
Yeah.
And of course, people give them lots of money, and the world doesn't. But it's going to happen next year, and it's almost on the never never. We have seen that from some of the anti-vaxxers who say, everyone who has the vaccine dead within 1 year.
Yep.
And you say, but it's been 2.5 years. Dead within 2 years or 3 years. And then it becomes 5 years, and then it becomes 10 years, and then it becomes 20 years. And even 40 years down the line, they'll say, everyone who had that vaccine, they'll be dead within 50 years. Well, probably, because most people who had it were over 50 when they had it. So
True.
It's quite likely. But again, it's trying to get people to believe something that makes them feel better. And I think the whole big government, big pharma, Bill Gates, World Economic Forum, whatever it is, becomes that big bad enemy, and almost takes the place of the devil or something in people's minds. It gives them something to blame, because, a virus that jumps from bats to humans because we've been encroaching on nature, to a scientist, that's scary, because it suggests it's going to happen again and again and again as we continue to encroach on nature. But to someone that doesn't give them anyone to blame, they can't blame anyone in particular. Whereas if you blame it on Bill Gates or the CIA or the Chinese or whatever, it gives you a focus, I think, for your fear.
And that it would be preventable. If we can stop those people doing it, it's preventable. But if you're the scientist, well, it can happen again and again and again because we're encroaching on nature.
Yeah.
Well, also, just in a broader sense, like if you know who's doing it to you, it's strangely more comforting. Like there's nothing more terrifying than randomness, like the randomness of a disease. Like, but if you thought that Bill Gates has done this to kill you, I know that sounds worse, but actually, strangely, psychologically, that's comforting because at least you know what to expect.
You have an answer.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, again, it comes back to what I first said, which is this explanation of the unknown. And that's the thing with viruses. Viruses are complicated. The immune system is complicated. Diseases are complicated. Climate is complicated. Zoonotic disease. These things are all very, very complicated. And we've become a society where we specialize in developing knowledge. But that knowledge is held by a few. And, I've spent a lot of time at university doing various degrees. I've spent a lot of time working as a researcher. I still don't know an awful lot about this virus. I know little specialized bits about it. But because I've been there and I've learned that, and I work with other researchers, I may not know much about how it tweaks the interferon response, but I know people who do. And I think because I know them personally, that makes it familiar to me. But I can appreciate, as a layperson who knows nothing about how viruses work, a virus is a very, very scary thing. It can get in, it can cause horrible disease, it can kill you. And many people in this country will know of someone who's died from it, or who's severely ill from it, who's hospitalized, or who has long COVID. Almost everyone in the country will. And not knowing what is happening is really, really, really frightening, as
Absolutely.
you say. And identifying that focus for your fear makes it less frightening. And, I mean, you often see, this thing, Nuremberg 2.0 and so on and so forth. And, even today I had, people are waking up and they're coming for you. Well, these are all, they're empty threats. But what they are is, people were saying today, more and more of us are waking up. Well, it's not. It always seems to be the same handful of people referencing the same opinion leaders. And it's not moving, but I think it gives them a sense of fellowship. It gives them a sense of, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
you feel like you're part of a movement,
and a resistance movement too.
Yes, I felt like I was a truth activist.
You're a Wolverine. You're not some sort of slightly terrified, whinging nincompoop. Like
I wasn't.
Not you. Like
I was a truth activist, rapping in the streets, going to protests.
The really worrying thing is how some people approach this, because if there's something you don't understand, so I know nothing, for example, about nuclear physics.
Right.
If we had a situation where one of the nuclear reactors in this country started to go critical and so on and so forth, I wouldn't just go onto Twitter and get, Bob in Romford's view on this, who's a taxi driver.
Whack a screwdriver in the back.
I would want to speak to a nuclear physicist who would say, look, don't worry, because, carbon rods, et cetera, and safety system, this, and this. And I would want to speak to someone who had deep working knowledge. Similarly, I speak to people online and I say, well, look, I'm a viral immunologist. And there was all this kerfuffle about IgG4, which is nothing to worry about. And people say, but what about IgG4? I say, well, that's a normal part of an immune response. It does this, it does this, it does this. It's fine. And I get people saying, you're lying, or you're wrong, or you don't understand it. Well, that's what I do. And I've got no reason to lie about this because it's what I do. But again, there are people who would much rather believe this pseudo-religious point of view than listen to someone who actually is informed about what is happening.
Yeah, it's basically like you were just saying, bringing it back to sort of religion and everything. Like, it's a personal truth. And that's what they think they have. And when it comes to things that are decided by consensus, personal truth doesn't matter. When it's your religion, if it's your spirituality, you get to practice it how you practice it. It's you. Yeah. But this is something else. Right. Let's get into this.
Okay. So various WhatsApp messages have been released. There's about 10 that are juicy. Now, appreciate that they are being released. So if anyone listens to this and goes, you didn't talk about that one, it's because it wasn't out yet. So we're very, very sorry. The first one of interest was from April 2020. So this is just prior to the lockdown, is it? When do we actually lock down? We locked down in March the 26th. So so it's just after the lockdown started. And Matt Hancock says, Chris Whitty has done an evidence review and now recommends testing of all going into care homes and segregation whilst awaiting result. This is obviously a good positive step, but we must put it into the dock. And Alan Nixon, who's a SPAD, says, that's not an insult. It's just special advisor. I was trying to save time, and now I've wasted even more time explaining it. Never mind. It says I wasn't in the testing meeting. Just to check, officials are saying your steer is to remove the commitment to testing on admission to care homes from the community, but keep commitment to testing on admission to care homes from hospital. Is that right? And Matt Hancock responds, fine, tell me if I am wrong, but I'd rather leave it out and just commit to test and isolate all going into care from hospital. I do not think the community commitment adds anything and it muddies the water. Have that for a Q&A response. So essentially what this is saying is that people going from hospitals, elderly people being discharged from hospitals into care homes, and people being taken from the community who were ill into care homes where they could be looked after. Chris Whitty had advised that everybody should be tested to make sure that they weren't carrying COVID, and if they were, that they should be isolated. That's not what Chris Whitty ended up doing. Chris Whitty ended up doing the actual policy. I've got it here. It says, residents may be admitted to a care home from a home setting. Some of these patients may have COVID, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic. All of these patients can be safely cared for in a care home if this guidance is followed. Negative tests are not required prior to transfers, admissions into the care home. So basically what happened was, rather than test everybody, they decided to actually test nobody. And this was an absolute disaster. This was, furthermore, what the policy was if one person in a care home, in a sort of sector of the care home, got COVID, they locked that sector down, ensuring that everybody else in that sector would get COVID. And these were vulnerable elderly people, and this was prior to having a vaccine. And what's strange is that this thing, right, that nobody's really talking about this. I'm like, other than to say, oh, it's a red herring, because this shows that COVID is real and that COVID is dangerous, and that the government weren't actually that interested. They're interested on the surface with appearing to do the right thing. But what Matt Hancock is more interested here in is his public persona. He's got this target of he wanted to get 1 million people tested before Christmas. He basically had testing targets, and he felt that testing people going into the care homes from the community would slow that down. And so he didn't want to do this because he wanted to basically, to use an expression from The Wire, juke the stats. He wanted to make it look like he was doing far better than he was, whilst actually putting people into the care home. And we may touch on this later because they do bring this up in the thing. But the reason for this is because at the time, the UK government was adopting a let it rip, herd immunity, let's take it on the chin policy. They thought that basically it would be cheaper. This was at the advice of the Treasury, and specifically from a think tank from the Treasury called Sergrew Communications and a publication called Economic Insight, which is connected to the Nudge Unit. They decided essentially that it would be cheaper and it would be less detrimental to the economy to basically let it rip. And they made a terrible mistake. Why did they decide to go for that particular angle? Because their donors wanted them to go for it. All of the Tory donors are connected in some way to the oil or the oil refinery industry. And in April of 2020, oil for the very first time in history went into negative equity, which meant that you had to pay people to take it off your hands, right? So who would be affected by lockdown measures? It was the landlord class, and it's the petrochemical industries. That's why we banned people going out of the country on planes, but never stopped people coming into the countries, because that was a favour to the air industry, who also coincidentally have been known to donate to the Tory government. And this is where the Telegraph comes into it, because the Telegraph was also very anti-lockdown, and Isabel Oakeshott was also very anti-lockdown. And so this is essentially what they're trying to do now. They're trying to retcon through these WhatsApp messages. Oh, see, we were right all along. And bizarrely, the first one that was released shows that actually, no, they were wrong. They were totally wrong.
Yeah, that COVID is dangerous.
Yeah. And it resulted, and the mishandling of it resulted in huge amounts of deaths that could have been prevented. And that is what gets on my fucking nerves about this, is that's a real conspiracy, okay? But we don't want to do that. Oh, no, we want to do it. So it's 5G, it's the phones that are killing us and stuff like that. Ridiculous. The real conspiracy here is incompetence and a lack of care from the government. And
Yep.
that is what, for some reason, the alternative media, the new media, as they're now calling themselves, right? Fucking arseholes. Anyway, they've got it totally wrong. They've got it totally wrong because they don't have a single individual thought in their head. David Icke said in January that it was 5G and then very later that COVID doesn't exist. And so everybody followed the party line, which is the very, very opposite of being a free thinker or doing your own research. But yeah, sorry, that's a little bit of a bugbear of mine. Anyway. You've got to remember as well, again, like, did they go for herd immunity? Absolutely. Boris Johnson said, David Valance and David Halpern and various people from the Nudge Unit, Boris Johnson went on television telling people that herd immunity was going to be the best thing. They told the Italian Prime Minister that they were going for herd immunity. And famously, the Italian Prime Minister went, "You're a maniac if you do that. Do you know how many people are dying here?" Of course, Boris Johnson later said, and this was before the second lockdown, that he didn't want another lockdown, that he was prepared to let the bodies pile high in the streets. Why? Because he doesn't care about the population or the public. He cares about his donors. So these aren't in chronological order. I do apologise, but here's an example of what basically Boris Johnson is thinking. As late as August, when we've already seen massive deaths, so August 2020, he's read something in one of these stupid magazines like The Spectator or Spiked Online, who all just coincidentally happen to be, financed by Tory donors. And he's concerned that basically the mortality rate of COVID isn't as high as he thinks it is. He says, What's the mortality rate of COVID? I've just read somewhere that it's fallen to 0.04% from 0.1%. So by my maths, that's down from 1 in 1,000 to about 1 in 2,000. And I seem to remember that when the plague began, we thought that the fatality rate was 1 in 100. So if all 66 million people in the UK were to be infected, we could expect 33,000 deaths. And yet we've already had 41. Is that why the death rate is going down? Is it possible that COVID is starting to run out of potential victims? How can we possibly justify the continuing paralysis to control a disease that has a death rate of 1 in 2,000? Chris Whitty says, trying to be polite, it's somewhere between 0.4% and 1%, depending on how you calculate it. But in practice, it's a lot lower than this if you're young, especially children, and significantly higher if you are old or have multiple other medical conditions. It's probably gone down a bit due to the better medical management, but there is still appreciable mortality in older people. Matt Hancock steps in. Chances of dying of an under 35 is negligible, but you can still transmit. So it's important to let people know their risk. The big challenge is whether it's possible to segment those with the higher risk. Then finally, Patrick Valance comes in and says, it seems that the FT figure is 0.04%, i.e. 4%, not 0.04%, as is the case fatality rate, not the infection rate. And then Dominic Cummings, who, by the way, we'll come on to that in a minute, said, yep, bad explaining from the FT. And Boris Johnson says, so what is it? Is it 0.04? If that's not a percentage, 5 marks, show you're working. And so Dominic Cummings says 0.04% as a probability means 4%. So essentially, this is Boris Johnson's misunderstanding. What they're saying is that the case fatality rate for COVID at that time was about 4%.
Yeah, so I think that really indicates part of the problem with all of this. You've got scientific advisors who understand what is happening,
Mm-hmm.
They understand the probabilities, they understand the risks, they understand what is happening. As far as we knew, and it is important to remember we're looking at that with hindsight. And at one point, we hoped we might get herd immunity, but and you never actually know until you study the virus for long enough. You can't have a new virus emerge one day and go, yep, we'll get herd immunity to this or we won't. So you've got scientific advisors who are going on the best information they have available. They're feeding it to politicians who, frankly, don't understand any of the details.
Absolutely.
And this is the problem. We have science ministers who are not scientists. We have health ministers who have never worked anywhere near medicine. We have agriculture ministers who have never been on a farm. And the problem with all of this is they can't then pass the information And so what they do is they then do the mental gymnastics and say, how can I use this information to make me look good so we get re-elected?
Yes.
So I get re-elected is probably their primary concern. And I mentioned that very message to my 12-year-old son. He's good at maths. He's top set maths. He's very good at maths. And I said, 0.04 as a probability, what percentage is that? And he said, well, 4%. My 12-year-old doing pre-GCSE maths appreciates this. Having a prime minister who is jumping to completely the wrong conclusion immediately, and even when the expert sets him right and says, no, that is 4%, he's turning around saying, sorry, I don't believe you.
I know, right?
Is the real problem, because if you've got a politician refusing to listen to the people who know what they're talking about, then what happens is any decisions that are made are uninformed decisions, and that's when you get disastrous effects. I mean, look at, there's far too many to mention throughout the pandemic of these decisions that have been taken for personal political reasons rather than for the good of the nation or of individuals.
Yep. Yeah, very much so. And I'll keep repeating this. That is the real conspiracy. And for some reason, the conspiracy lot seem to have completely missed this, and because they're determined to prove that the whole thing was a hoax.
Could be that the politicians, it's just because they're venal and self-serving, whereas, a lot of the conspiracy theories, they want to see active malice.
Yes.
Exactly.
Rather than, to be honest, if saving the population, would have produced better poll results, they would have saved us. If they could have done it fairly cheaply and got better poll, they would have done that like a shot, because that's what served their ends. They don't care about us; they care about them and their political results.
Mm-hmm. Right. The third one is Cabinet Secretary Sir Simon Case, and basically this is in February. This is in February 2021, so it does flit around a bit. And basically, there's 149 holidaymakers have just been detained in British hotels after trying to get back into the country. And this was when basically, if you come back in, and at this point, we did have vaccines, but not everyone was vaccinated by any stretch of the imagination. It was only one dose. And so if you came back, you had to sometimes quarantine in hotels. People were obviously annoyed about that, and it is a little bit callous. Basically, on the 5th of February, they say we're giving all the big families all the suites and we're putting pop stars in the box room. That's Matt Hancock. Simon Case says, well, I just want to see some of the faces of the people coming out of first class and into a Premier Inn shoebox. And then on the 16th of February, Simon Case says, how many people we locked up in hotels yesterday? Matt Hancock obviously joking, says none. But 149 chose to enter the country and are now in quarantine hotels due to their own free will, to which Simon Case says, hilarious. Which basically, this is the point. It does show a contempt for the public. This is a difficult one, right? Okay, because it's a private message. And this is not to defend any of these politicians, but the way you speak in private, the way that you joke in private and stuff like that is not always the way that you would speak in public, and everyone can be accused of gallows humor and piss taking and stuff like that, particularly when you're talking to like work colleagues, mates, or whatever, people that you've got a close relationship. However, these are the people that we're supposed to be keeping us safe during a crisis, and it shows a pattern of contempt. A pattern of contempt and self-servingness. Basically, they're not interested in the actual effects of what will happen to these 149 people. They're more interested, again, in how it's publicly perceived. You could make the argument that they're right, okay, that if you went on holiday at that point, you knew the risk that you were going to get put in a quarantine hotel. Nobody thinks that that's nice or whatever, but that was the rules at the time. If whether you want to say that was a good idea or whatever, or tyranny, that's for people to decide. I don't recall the bit in 1984 where they forced them to stay in a hotel for a week after a holiday, but I don't know. Maybe I missed that bit. But again, it does show a huge amount of contempt.
I think that's the thing. It shows what they actually think, because politicians have script writers, they have PR specialists, they have so on to make what they say appear in public look good.
Yeah, totally.
And this shows what they really think. And around that time, I remember speaking with some scientific colleagues, and I said, who on earth is going on holiday at this time of year? You'd have to be mad flying internationally when there's a pandemic. And I said, if you come back and you have to spend time in quarantine, well, that unfortunately is sort of the price you're going to have to pay.
Yeah.
But at no point did I say, ha, 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 look at that. It's good, it's a good thing that they're being locked
exactly.
Because to do that would it's sort of dehumanizing. And what it does is it takes away from them as people.
Yes. Yeah, just a problem to be solved.
Yeah, these are not people they think they're talking about. They think they're just talking about statistics and numbers. And it's completely irrelevant to them who they are. They don't care who they are. They don't care what happens. And I have seen other Twitter messages, with one person saying his father had to spend £2,000 to go into one of these quarantine hotels because he was actually abroad when the regulations came in, and he wanted to return home to his family and got hit with this. And no one in the family thought that was funny at all. But
no. It's one of those things, isn't it? And there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be people where it's like, okay, I can look at that and go, I don't think that's fair. I think that's bit much, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, I knew that was what would happen if you went on holiday. To suggest that you didn't know that would be naive. But again, the point is that it's the dehumanization of people by people who are tasked and paid a huge amount of money to look after us. And the next WhatsApp message encapsulates that perfectly. This is from April 2020. And basically, George Osborne, who was at that point the editor of the Evening Standard, Matt Hancock is basically. This is in April. He says, I need to call a favour in tomorrow. I currently have 22,000 spare slots tomorrow at my drive-throughs. Hence, I've extended eligibility today. Demand just isn't there. This is obvious good news about spread of virus, but hard for my target. So I could really do with a testing splash. Can we make this happen? And basically, this is when PCR testing was just starting. And if you remember, we had to go to car parks and do it and stuff like that. And he was trying to get, I think, 100,000. He was trying to get 100,000 a day or something like that, and people weren't going. Now, the reason that people weren't going was probably because they were isolating if they were ill, his assumption that this makes it, this means that the virus isn't that prevalent. Well, I think we can show by the 200,000 plus deaths and 2.5 years of torment, etc., that was inaccurate. Anyway, George Osborne of the Evening Standard says, yes, of course, all you need to do tomorrow is give some exclusive words to the Standard and I'll tell the team to splash it. You're almost there. Send the words to me by 8 a.m. And basically, he gets back to him and basically he says, I really want to hit my targets. I really want to hit my targets. To which George Osborne says, yeah, I gathered. Because he's not bothered. And he doesn't care about Matt Hancock's reputation, but Matt Hancock clearly does care about appearing to be good. He's not finding out whether this is meaning that the virus is subsiding or whatever. He's just got targets to hit because he's told the press that he's going to do this. And that's it. And later, basically, Hancock texts him and goes, to be honest, though, I think that mass testing is going well. To which Osborne responds, no one thinks testing is going well, which is a bit of a sick burn, basically. Again, showing, just desperate contempt for people. Teaching unions were skeptical about the government instructions that schools should return during the pandemic. And basically, Matt Hancock says, what a bunch of absolute arses the teachers' unions are. And Gavin Williamson says, I know, they really, really just do hate work. And
God.
yeah, this is appalling. And then later in May, Joe Churchill was asking, why can't schools buy their own PPE? Why are we trying to reduce? We're trying to reduce dependence on the central supply system and revert to wholesalers as much as possible. But there must be a way of saying schools can access via LRFs if they have no alternative routes to get hold of any. I understand it's a tiny amount if in case a child becomes symptomatic at school. Gavin Williamson. So basically, teachers' unions are complaining that they don't have adequate PPE to make schools safe. And Matt Hancock is basically saying, oh, this is a bit of a problem. To which Gavin Williamson says it's basically as a last resort, so they can't use it as a reason not to open. All of them will, but some will just want to say that they can't, so they have an excuse to avoid having to teach. What joys. Now, again, this is proven completely wrong on all grounds. Children were shown to they could get infected. They could also infect the teachers. And further to their claim that teachers just didn't want to work, this is absolute bollocks. Like, teachers worked incredibly hard through the pandemic, incredibly hard. And I know that people want to say, oh, kids were so badly damaged. Right, okay. I know several, some of my friends have got kids of various ages. One of them aced his fucking university during the thing, did incredibly well. Others did brilliantly at school. And I know teachers that were teaching remotely, but teaching all the way through the pandemic, or for the majority of the pandemic. Like, I do know two children that were really, really badly affected by the pandemic, and that's because their mum died.
Jesus.
Right, so all these people say, the children, like, oh, fuck off. Like, I'd sooner miss some school than lose a parent. And this idea that it was irreparable child abuse is just is a despicable manipulation of the facts, to be quite honest.
My son caught it, and he was quite bad with it for a couple of weeks. He felt really, really bad, and he isolated himself in our house. He isolated himself in his room. He ate in his room. He stayed in there for a good couple of weeks. He didn't pass it on to anyone else in the household. But there are many, many children who are suffering from long COVID, and whose futures are ruined because it is taken years and years, if not decades, to recover from the infection. And that is going to be the defining event of their life.
COVID was. I may have this wrong. It was either the top or in the top 3 causes of death of children in the last couple of years, COVID. Yep. So to say that it doesn't affect, the reason it's not killed a lot of children, a lot by which I mean a huge number compared to adults, is because, you know what, children don't tend to die.
Yeah.
What I mean is that basically it looks like small numbers, but it's actually a large number of children comparable to other years. It's just that normally it's not normal for a lot of children to die anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And so, I mean, I think in the UK, the number's something like 150 or something like that, which, is a relatively small number compared to a couple 100,000 total. But there's still 150 children who would otherwise have had pretty much zero chance of dying during that time period.
And I think that, like, the number of children of similar age who usually would die of something comparable like the flu. I'm not saying that it's, you know what I mean? I think that's it's very low, isn't it? It's like in the tens or something, isn't it?
Or
like
single figures, Yeah.
So this is the point. Again, it looks like low, but it's about what it should be, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and again, that is, as you said, it's private messages. And it is a private conversation. However, what it shows is utter contempt for an entire profession. Yeah. And I wouldn't be at all surprised. You said about other messages yet to be released. I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't similar sort of messages about nurses, about doctors, about paramedics, about police officers, or about any other people who put themselves at high risk to save lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's one of the things that annoys me about the conspiracy thing, all this crap about Mid-Aslam and stuff like that. What you're suggesting is that it wasn't the government's fault, that Carol, who lives across the road, who's been a nurse for like 20 years, who's knows these people, who knows their kids who come in to visit them, who basically has decided to do this vocation for a life, suddenly decided, oh, fuck these people, I'm going to murder them en masse, right? What sort of an insane person thinks that? Oh, they were just following orders. Oh, come on. They're not stupid. If you've, and I'm using massive inverted commas here, figured it out, I'm pretty sure they would have figured it out.
Yeah.
Why has no nurse blown the whistle? Right? It's bullshit. And it's despicable.
And we know, the court case is happening at the moment with a paediatric nurse who's accused of murdering the babies.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Occasional cases. But these are very, very rare occasional cases. And when they happen, they are detected, they're flagged up, it becomes big news when one happens. And I really cannot believe that literally every nurse, doctor, paramedic, nursing assistant, physiotherapist, pharmacist, hospital manager, bed manager in the entire country is in on this.
Yeah.
And not one has come out with any evidence to support it. Not one.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? This is the point.
No.
I'll entertain, your decompartmentalization, people maybe not knowing some of the stuff that's going on in NASA or whatever. Right? Okay, fine.
Yep.
Whatever. But this is just, again, nonsense. And it's not just in this country, it's in every single country.
Yep.
Every single country, the same simultaneous thing has happened. They've all had the same idea, apparently.
And of course, it's also worth noting that, they were only following orders. Well, if they're only following orders, then surely it should be in all these WhatsApp messages because that's where the orders were coming from. And yet it's not.
No.
So, if it's a conspiracy theory that this is exposing, why is it not exposing specifically the conspiracy theory they're claiming?
Well, yeah.
Well, we've got some more coming up.
Yeah, the next one again just shows basically the lack of, again, you could make an argument that this is gallows humor, but when your job is Secretary of Health and when you've been told that excess deaths have risen to 10,000, and this was very early on in the excess care home deaths.
Yeah.
So the grannies and granddads and whatnot that have 10,000 have died. Matt Hancock replies by going, sorry, I only just got this message. And it's just, again, the sort of like you said earlier, he's dealing with statistics. He's not dealing with the fact that 10,000 people are dead. 10,000, people that had friends and family, human beings are dead. He's like, oh, God, this is going to look terrible for me.
It reminded me very much, when I was reading those, of Alan Partridge.
Yes, that's exactly what I was just thinking.
He has... Alan Partridge was designed to have no empathy, no... he doesn't form relationships. He doesn't understand people, and you can almost, see it saying, I'm sorry, 10,000 people have died, so you're not getting your second series. Oh, that's terrible news. No second series. And the thing, there is no empathy here for people who have died. There is no empathy for the situation. If I was in that position and I got that message, I'd be saying, good God, how bad could it get? Are we going to see, what do we do to stop this? What do we do to limit this? And his one is, that's not good.
I'm just thinking of the Partridge gif where he just shrugs his shoulders.
Pretty much, yeah. 10,000 people died. Yeah. Okay.
Right, next one is basically Boris Johnson saying it's all about testing. That's our Achilles heel. We can't deliver a sensible border policy or adequate track and trace because we can't test enough. Did we go to the Germans for those kits that Angela Merkel was offering? What's wrong with us as a country? Why can't we fix this? We've had months and months and months. I'm going quietly crackers about this, to which Matt Hancock says, don't go crackers. We have test capacity enough to do this. We have the biggest testing capacity in Europe. The problem is false negatives. So the medics are against releasing from self-isolation, whether for quarantine or TNT, with a negative test. No one in the world releases from quarantine with a negative test. Right. So again, this just shows several things. One, Boris Johnson seems like incredibly unself-aware as to why everything's gone bad over the last few months. It also shows that basically they are again ignoring the advice of the scientists. The scientists are saying you cannot rely solely on the test coming in because there is false negatives. Not what the conspiracy crowd said, where there's 90% false positives, because that's not true. There's actually 30% false negative on PCR tests, as far as I'm aware. But what they're doing is they're not taking the advice of the scientists who are saying that everyone coming in should isolate for 14 days regardless. It doesn't matter. You should isolate for 14 days. But again, this is because they wanted to keep the economy going. This is 2020, right? Okay. And that this is, we want tourists to come in. Why the hell would you want tourists to come in the summer of a pandemic? Yeah, absolutely. And again, this was June 2020. To be fair, it had all tailed off. It started getting nastier again in the sort of the January of 2021. But one revelation was that basically the reason that they went with masks in schools was not because, again, they listened to the scientific advice. It was basically because they didn't want to look silly, because Scotland had already done it. Scotland basically were going to go with masks, and so their position was, one would assume, that it would be they would make them look weak, basically. I'm about to ask about Boris Johnson. I'm about to ask about masks in schools before we perform another U-turn. Can I have a view on whether they are necessary? And Matt Hancock says, here's the medical advice. I understand the concern for secondary schools is because teenagers are hanging around in school corridors and hallways. Therefore, the easy answer when responding with face coverings is to say loitering around, probably playing shove halfpenny or whatever. Therefore, the easy answer then responding with face coverings is to say our guidance references one-way corridors, ventilation, etc., and to note that brief encounters as children switch lessons is usually a low risk. Move your kids on instead of introducing face mask requirements. But basically, they just say, well, considering that Scotland has just confirmed that they will recommend masks, it's hard to believe that we will not hold the line. But again, this basically shows... and Boris Johnson goes, the trouble is that the current guidance specifically excludes schools, God knows why. Wearing a face covering or face mask in schools or other education settings is not recommended. Face coverings may be beneficial for short periods indoors where there is a risk of close social contact with people you do not usually meet and where social distance or other measures cannot be maintained, for example, on public transport. This does not apply to schools or other education settings. Schools and other education or childcare settings should therefore not require staff, children and learners to wear face coverings. Now, they did actually go ahead with the policy because Chris Whitty said he said there's no reason one way or another not to do it, as far as I can tell. He said that they also make a point saying that there's no... Now, this has been spun. They said there's no rational or robust rationale for introducing children into the rule of 6 because there's not been like a scientific test to do it. But just the understanding of how a virus spreads and the understanding of perhaps avoid like close gatherings and stuff like that. That's why they recommended those measures. Now, I don't know about this. So Graham's the expert here. So there is an argument that you could do without masks that I have heard if you do all those other measures that they do, like ventilation and hand washing and stuff like that, making sure that the air is clean and stuff like that. But they didn't do that either. So, but regardless of that, what is your take on masks for children in schools?
So they're effective. The thing is, what you've got to remember about all of this is it's not binary. It's not black or white. It's not masks are completely effective or they're non-effective. Everything is somewhere in the middle. And there was, I think he's a New Zealand virologist who put forward a Swiss cheese model of mitigations. So basically, wearing a mask will not completely stop you spreading it or will stop you catching it. Okay. And obviously, the better the mask you wear, if you wear like a full FP3 respirator, you're far better protected than if you wear just a cloth mask. But a cloth mask still reduces viral spread.
Yeah.
So does vaccination. So does keeping a distance. So does ventilation with the windows open. And so it's a good analogy here is like a car. Okay. Seatbelts by themselves don't reduce injuries to zero. nor do really effective brakes, nor does having a clean windscreen, nor does XYZ. But if you do all of them, then what you do is reduce your chances as low as they possibly can be. And so, if you don't wear masks in something like a school environment, you are raising the risk for no real potential gains. Now, there's some arguments that, they're not that comfortable. And I have to say, I hate wearing a mask. But even now, I go into a shop and I wear my mask, and I've got one in my pocket here, wear the mask. It's not going to reduce my chance to zero. What it will do is it reduce my chances somewhat. Now, I don't know the exact percentage, and it's really, really, really hard to work out what that percentage might be, simply because there's so many factors. If I go into a room with 12 people in it, there's a different risk to if I'm in a room with 10 people in it. So you can't calculate your risk factor as a percentage. So having masks in schools is fairly cheap and easy because masks are fairly cheap and easily available. They have no real detriment in terms of they're not on medication. You don't have adverse effects to them, which, rare with vaccines. So there's very, very little downside to them.
Yeah.
But what they do is they reduce the risk. So, not doing that, again, to score a political point. So I know that they went through with it, but they only did it to score a political point.
Precisely, yeah.
And the scientific evidence was we should do it because it has a benefit. It might be small, it might be medium, it might be large. We don't know, but it has a benefit. And there's no downside to doing it other than a few pupils might complain. That's the scientific advice. And the politicians said, well, actually, let's do it because so we don't look silly compared to Scotland, which again is a complete disconnect from listening to the experts.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that is what these are showing, isn't it? Which is not what people are taking from it. The thing about masks, there was 2 points that got me. One, how incredibly pathetic the conspiracy crowd were about wearing masks. It's really not that big of a deal, to be quite honest. You just put a mask on, and they were whinging about it like it was a vinegar dipped cock ring or something. Do you know what I mean? I was like, for Christ's sake, they're not asking you to nail your testicles to the wall every day. It's literally just slipping on a mask. Can you really not cope with that? You're really not going to cope when the real Illuminati turns up, are you? And then the second point was the irony of all these people saying, oh, you really shouldn't wear masks. I'd spent God knows how many years warning you about the dangers of facial recognition technology.
Yep.
They just forgot that one, as far as I can see.
I think a lot of the complaints about masks were because it's a visible sign. If you wear a mask, it shows that you accept that COVID is a significant risk, that so even now I go into a shop and I get a few funny looks. Yeah. Now, no one said anything. If they do, I will point out what I do, what I know, and so on. But the thing is that if you walk into a shop wearing a mask, you are advertising to people, I am aware of the risk and I am doing something to mitigate it. And so, coming back to sort of seeing themselves as activists, as freedom fighters, not wearing a mask is that symbol of, rebellion. It's the we're different, we don't have to do what we're told type thing.
Absolutely. Right, now this one really gave grist to the conspiracy mill, and again, actually, to sort of the mainstream media have sort of picked up on this as well. Right, Matt Hancock, we frighten the pants off everyone with the new strain, but the complication with the Brexit is taking the top line. Basically, that's very poorly written. But this was in December 2020, I believe. When was it? To which Damien Poole says, "Yep, that will get proper behaviour change." And then Matt Hancock drops this truth bomb: "When do we deploy the new variant?"
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. And Damien Poole says, been thinking more about this and we need to be more cautious. The strain, that is. Think you made the point earlier, but we need to keep schools off paperwork/agenda, at which Matt Hancock says, yes. Damien Poole says, Worth doing a bit about no leaking at the top, I think. Big risk with the variant. Right-wing papers go for a renewed push for the let it rip on the basis of the vaccine strategy is undermined. That's why we reassure on the vaccine, says Matt Hancock. So first off, that's, again, showing that the right-wing papers like The Telegraph, which Isabel Oakeshott just so happens to work for, right-wing people like Richard Tice and all the other donors to the Tory party were behind the let it rip strategy. They wanted to go for herd immunity. This is being admitted by Damien Poole in these messages. Now, what people think, when do we deploy the new variant and we'll frighten the pan? Let's go with this one first. That people have really interpreted that as if he had it in his desk drawer or something, and he was waiting to release it onto the public, potentially through some infected pigeons or something. I don't know.
It feeds into the biological weapon conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but what's actually going off with it? Two things, right? One, we frightened the pants off of everyone with the new strain, not to defend them, but that's how everything works. Can you remember the adverts for AIDS? Can you remember the adverts for make sure your brakes work? Can you remember don't drink and drive?
Yeah.
One more, Dave. Can you remember don't go in the quarry, don't swim in the quarry, stupid children, and all of that crap, and patches and all of these things.
This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah. Christ, that's like. We're of an age where we were brought up being scared shitless of everything. Why we ever went outside, I don't know, because everything was apparently terrifying. And so it's not new to use scare tactics. And there's a very important, again, not to defend them, but there's important context here. This is December, just before Christmas, right? Okay, just when you've gone into a second lockdown, and then we've come out of it, and then there's been some sort of tiered lockdowns and stuff like that. Everyone's sick to death of this. They want to have Christmas and stuff like that. And this is further exacerbated by the fact that twats have spent the last 6 months downplaying the COVID virus, downplaying it essentially. And I'm not just talking about the conspiracy lot and the contrarian knobs and the people that went to Trafalgar Square and all those idiots. I'm talking about Spiked Online, The Spectator, Talk TV, that one that Julia Hartley Brewer's on. All of these, the Telegraph, the Mail had Peter Hitchens constantly pouring scorn on all of the measures. People forget about this. You had the government themselves undermining lockdown strategies with several things. Eat Out to help out. There was a PR campaign by Topham Gurham to get the economy going that, by the way, suggested that you shouldn't be wearing masks because masks basically made people feel uncomfortable and so they wouldn't go out spending. That came from the government. You had government scientists like Carol Sikora and Sunita Gupta, who, by the way, are also financed by people like George Von Opel and connected, financed by donors to the Tory government, having a meeting with Boris Johnson in September of that year, suggesting again that they go for herd immunity.
Yep.
Right. So with all of these, in May of that year, you had Dominic Cummings shopping himself to the press, after driving to Dundee or wherever he went, to that castle to test his eyesight or whatever. Yeah. Right. Okay. So you've got the government. This is what I've been trying to explain to people. You had Sage, Chris Whitty and various people telling them the sensible advice, what they should do. You had the PR side of the government pretending that they were doing that. And then you had other elements of the government, the CRG, Us for Them, PCR claims, all these things connected to Michael Yeadon and all these idiots that are actually, if you bother to look at it, actually basically coming from backbenchers of the Conservative Party, like Mark Francois and various people involved in it. You've got Desmond Swain, you've got other opportunists, just basically banging the drum because basically they realise they're going to score some populist brownie points. And so you were in a position where people weren't listening anymore. And you know what happened? We had the largest spike of cases, hospitalizations and deaths following that Christmas.
Yep, we did.
But again, they're not actually bothered. Now, here's the thing that people did, like, when do we deploy the new variant? They withheld information about a deadly new variant that proved to be far deadlier than the previous variant from the public because of political reasons, not because they wanted the public to die or because they wanted to encourage vaccines or because they wanted to coerce another lockdown, for public relations reasons and political reasons. And that is the most terrible thing. And again, all of the conspiracy crowd are going to miss that, like by a country fucking mile, right? That this is showing, again, a detachment from reality to the point where they don't give a shit if people die. It's more. It's about, again, their public persona, and it's frightening, to be quite honest. People are going to say, "Oh, this shows that they weren't taking it seriously." Well, that's bullshit, because a message on the 10th of September read, "The lab lost Jacob Rees-Mogg's child's test, so we've got a courier going to the family home tonight. The child will take a test, and the courier will take it straight to the lab. Should have the result tomorrow AM." And this was at a time when we were we were running out of tests. Nurses were running out of PPE, and the government, again, Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of the people that was downplaying the measures, and he obviously thought that it was serious enough for him to have a test sourced and couriered to one of his children. Like, it's again, it highlights that there's one rule for them, one rule for us, just like with the Partygate. And again, this doesn't show, Partygate doesn't show that they knew that that the virus wasn't serious. It shows that people are idiots. People will forego sensible actions for fun. Everyone knows that drugs will ultimately kill you. They still do them because they're fun, right? Everybody knows that driving fast, drinking, having unsafe sex with strangers, all of these things are sketchy and dangerous. And yet, for some weird reason, people still do them. Like people doing stupid things is not an indication that they knew that it wasn't a thing. Otherwise, you'd make the argument that every drink driver in the world has got some sort of inside knowledge. They know the score. No, they don't know the score. They're just willing to risk it because people are fundamentally quite lazy. And it's as simple and straightforward as that.
Everything's a scale, isn't it? Because almost everything we do is a risk to some extent, and you judge it on almost on a moment by moment basis. Is it safe to do this? You know, and I've done things where I've been, fixing fences, and I've looked back and thought that was really quite stupid. Why did I do that? Just to save myself 20 minutes of having to drive home and get the right tool and come back and do it properly. And you know, that does it. I realise that it's damn dangerous, but I've taken that split second decision to go, yeah, I'm sure I can get away with it this time. And that's the thing that, you know, Boris Johnson, when he went to his parties, thought, I'll get away with it, you know, for this time. I'm sure I'll be all right.
Yeah, this is why, again, why do anybody do anything? Because they think they can get away with it. But this next one, again, is for the conspiracy lot. He asks if he'd spoken to Tedros at the WHO about NVAP, which is a new variant assessment platform, basically. So this is the thing that the WHO's got, looking at new variants. And Damien Poole says to Matt Hancock, have you have spoken to them about this? No response. And he jokes, no promises, but I'm trying to land a Bill Gates endorsement of the platform. And Matt Hancock responds, tell him that considering how many people I'm getting his chips injected into, he owes me one.
Here we go.
Now, he's obviously taking the piss.
Yeah.
He's obviously taking the piss out of idiots, like that think that there's microchips in the vaccines and stuff like that. But I've seen dozens of people say, see, he's admitted it. See, he's admitted it. This is the proof. And it's like, really? Aren't you taking that on incredible face value?
Well, I actually got suspended from Twitter for 48 hours once because I happened to remark that, COVID was actually caused by space aliens who are organised by the Queen. And actually, Elvis is their general, and he wasn't killed. He was just in hiding. And he's the one who actually has made this virus to have 5G so it can remote control people. And I posted it, and it's a complete and utter, fiction, and it was so. I thought it's so over the top, and I got suspended for spreading misinformation. Yeah, but the thing is, it was you say things like that, and because or I say things like that almost out of an exasperation at the stupid stories I see. Having from what I've seen publicly of Matt Hancock, I think he has a rather limited sense of humour.
Yes.
And he thought he was trying to be funny.
Yes.
And actually, probably no one laughed.
No.
And in that context, if you think he's being serious, it looks terrible. But it's just a bad joke, really.
Absolutely.
It's just a terrible joke by an absolute melt.
Yes.
I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. So, for all those people that think that the government weren't actually that interested in herd immunity, August 2020, and this is just prior to the meeting in September 2020 when they decided not to have a second lockdown because, or to delay the second lockdown because they were going for herd immunity. But anyway, Boris Johnson posts an article from the Spectator. Spectator just so happens to be owned by donors to the Tory party who have connections to the oil refinery industry. Don't know if that's relevant.
Follow the money.
Exactly. So this Spectator article says herd immunity is still the key in the fight against COVID-19. And this is in August 2020 when we've pretty much proven that this was not correct. And Chris Whitty says, it's a good debating article with many fair points, but it's two flaws. For most serious infections without a vaccine, control is achieved without herd immunity. We do not yet know whether immunity to COVID is lasting enough to achieve population immunity at any point. We hope a vaccine might. We're a long way from that level of natural immunity now for sure, certainly out of London. More importantly, in the short term, it does not address the fundamental problem of how we stop younger people eventually infecting older, sicker ones directly or indirectly. If we could achieve a society where only the invulnerable got infected, we would be in the completely different position. But that's a lot easier to say right than do. This was the major flaw with the Great Barrington Declaration, which, by the way, is basically financed by Koch Industries related think tanks, and they just happen to be oil industry, oil refinery, and connected to the IEA, who just so happen to be donors to the Tory party. Again, I don't know whether there's a pattern emerging here, but basically
needs some analysis. Yep.
Yeah, it's tricky to say, isn't it, really? But this is the problem with their proposal was, let's say that everybody out here, okay, we lock away the vulnerable, we wall them up like an epileptic royal, okay, and leave them there for 6 months or whatever. Whilst the rest of the population merrily catches COVID to the point where it doesn't affect us anymore. And then we let them all out. And the fundamental flaw that nobody explained was, yeah, but they're still going to be vulnerable to COVID. And now COVID's endemic. How does that work? It doesn't.
And it also doesn't explain who gives them food, who acts as nursing or care home staff.
Well, they'll have to be walled up with them.
Yeah, and so who provides their IT support when their phones stop working or their broadband. So basically, you've got to then wall up a big part of society with them to support those vulnerable people, and so the whole thing is completely unworkable. It's a joke, and you're right. Yeah. At the time, we knew that herd immunity was likely never going to happen. Certainly from infection, and we had enough evidence at that stage. And so it can only be that no scientist, no medic at that stage would have been saying, let's just infect people and that will protect us. No one.
Yeah. Well, there were certain ones who were saying it, but none that was credible. Sunitra Gupta was saying it, Carl Hennigan was saying it, Agnes Tednall was saying it, Carol Sikora was saying it, Jay Bhattacharya was saying it, frauds were saying it.
When I say no scientists, I mean credible scientists. People who I would go up to a conference and say, that was an interesting talk, tell me more about your work. If I saw someone like that at a conference, I would say, why are you such an idiot? How come you've abandoned everything you know about science and medicine to pursue this fallacy?
Hey, must be the money.
So I personally, I don't count Peter Hennigan as a scientist. He's not. He's a joke. And that's the problem. No scientist said it. And so you're right. Again, they've gone with politics, with look, with appearance over science.
Okay, this is the final one, right? Okay, and bizarrely, the alternative media haven't really spoken about this one. Officials dismissed a Warwick University study that came out in October 2020 that said that Sunak's initiative, Eat Out to Help Out, may have caused a significant rise in COVID-19 infections. The report estimated that 8 to 17% of detected new clusters could be linked to the scheme. Despite the government categorically rejecting the findings, the publication of former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages appears to confirm that there were concerns about the then Chancellor's scheme in summer 2020, driving an increase in infections. In the leaked messages obtained by the Daily Telegraph, Hancock told the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case that he'd kept it out of the news and that the initiative was spreading the virus. He said that his department had informed the Treasury and was protecting officials. Jonathan Ports, professor in economics and the public policy at King's College London and a former senior civil servant at the Treasury, said it looks on the face of it that the Treasury was deliberately trying to conceal what the evidence was about Eat Out to Help Out. The scheme, which was launched in August 2020, was one of Sunak's measures when he was Chancellor to support the economy as it reopened after lockdown, and he offered 50% discount up to £10 per head on meals and soft drinks. A working paper published by Tiemo Fetzer, an economics professor at Warwick University, found that the initiative was closely linked to an increase in new cases during August and into early September. The paper found that the virus spread more rapidly in areas with lots of participating restaurants and said that the scheme might have public health costs that vastly outstrip its short-term economic benefits. So yeah, basically what this is again is that the government are hiding stuff that is, by hiding, it's detrimental to the public. Basically, their initiative to get people to drive the economy by getting people to go back to restaurants, which at the time people said, hang on, isn't this a bit of a daft idea? And they said, no, it'll be fine. Turns out it was actually a bit of a daft idea, basically.
Yeah, and the thing is that politicians never really like being called out when they're wrong. And so when this sort of thing gets announced on the news, it says, Eat Out to Help Out is going to spread the virus. It'll say we approached, the Treasury for a comment, and they said the Treasury is committed to driving down cases.
Yeah.
And that will be the sort of response they give.
There's a trope that goes through the conspiracy world that the lockdown caused more deaths than it prevented.
Yes.
That came from a paper by Economic Insight, which is connected to the Treasury. It's a think tank that publishes publications from the Treasury. So that idea came from the government itself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
This is what we're up against.
Yeah,
this is the problem. On one hand, we've got the conspiracy theorists who want to see, a devil crouch behind every rock and every wall, waiting to jump out on them. And at the other end, we've got basically politicians. And I think it's probably reasonably fair to say that it wouldn't. I don't think it would have mattered who was in government out of the political parties we have.
No, probably not.
Whoever had been in government, they would have been taking relatively similar strategies. It would all have been how it looks rather than the actual outcomes. And we've got politicians who really care about themselves far more than they care about the country.
Yeah.
And in the middle, it's us trying to do our best. And
so you don't think that these releases show that the conspiracy theories have been vindicated, that basically COVID is fake and that everything was a lie and lockdown was unnecessary?
No,
it doesn't, does it?
I mean, the thing is, if there was a message in there where Matt Hancock said to Boris Johnson, we're really getting away with this, the fact that the COVID virus doesn't actually exist, and if that message was in there, but it's not, and there is nothing that I have seen in any of the messages that even slightly suggests that COVID is fake or that PCR doesn't work or that...
No, in fact, it says the opposite. It says that it's dangerous, it killed people, and that government incompetence, although they were desperately trying to say that it was not that bad, that the scientists and the evidence, but by which I mean cases, deaths, etc., showed that this was false.
Yeah,
so
and I think you're absolutely right. What it's showing is that the conspiracy theories are wrong. they're completely wrong, and they have absolutely no basis in fact. And and I think that comes back to what we talked about at the very start, which is the mental gymnastics. They take it and they wave it. It's like the Pfizer release documents. They go, that proves, and you say, where? What page?
Yep.
It proves it. Yeah, but
what
page? It's in there. You have to read it. Yeah, but what page? Tell me what page. I'll go and read it. You all read all of it.
Yeah.
You say, what does it actually say? Go and read it. And that's the thing. It's the totality of the evidence is being waved as proof rather than any specifics within that evidence.
Very much so. And again, the further point that people need to remember is that Isabel Oakeshott, who's the partner of Richard Tice, and the Telegraph, they were all anti-lockdown anyway. They're all anti-lockdown all the way through it. And this is a way to blame the lockdown for the economic failings of the country rather than Brexit, which they also have to be very pro. And also, they're trying to claim that Hancock forced Boris, who is the Brexit man, into the lockdown. So it's a distraction from Brexit. It's a distraction from Partygate. It's also a distraction from their incredibly softball interview of Matt Hancock, because they're grifters. They don't give a shit. She was happy to do his book. Now she's happy to stab him in his back.
But I think the thing is, I don't think it even shows that she wants to show anyway. No. It doesn't show that lockdowns caused a huge amount of harm. If anything, it shows that the lockdowns weren't sufficient. And I think she's failed in that goal because I think she's sort of into it, as many, like people like Tice are. She's seeing what she wants to see in the messages.
Yeah.
And by releasing them, she thinks other people will see that too.
Yes.
But actually, people are looking at it. Most people who are looking at it with a non-objective point of view. They're looking at the messages per se and going, well, it shows that politicians are idiots.
Yes.
And listen to the scientists. And that's pretty much it. What it also highlights, I think, is that, when we're on Twitter and we get people saying the virus doesn't exist, conspiracy theories, these are a very, very, very tiny subset of people. If I went to my local town and I spoke to 200 people on the high street, I doubt if even one of them would come up with some of the... You might get people saying, oh, I think the government are screwing it or whatever. And if my friend wasn't there, I don't think there would be a single one who would be saying, oh, it's all a big conspiracy by Bill Gates and so on. And I think in the same way, I think most people understand the lockdowns had benefits. They weren't great. No one wanted them. No one thought, yippee, let's have a lockdown. But they did the job they had to do at the time.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that basically, they could have been done better.
Yes.
But you had a government that essentially didn't really care. Like, they did it late. They broke it up early. They were more focused on the economy. Could they have supported the vulnerable more? Could they have supported people's businesses more? Could they have given people more information? Yes, a million times yes. Was their messaging contradictory and shit? Yes.
But you show me a single public policy ever that couldn't have been done better.
Precisely.
And so, it could have been done better, but then that's true of the entirety of life.
So I want to wrap it up with one good piece of news out of all of this. My father-in-law, he is a Tory party member. He is a Telegraph subscriber. And these leaks have made him unsubscribe from the Telegraph. He's no longer a paid-up member. He said, I now see that they have an agenda. I now see that they don't actually serve the people or my conservative values. And guess what, Telegraph? You're losing people out there because they're now seeing through your agenda.
Absolutely.
Some dare call it conspiracy.